Hey, good morning, guys. Hope everybody had a nice weekend. For those of you that might be taking AP tests, whether you took them last week or this week, hope you're doing well as you prepare for them and you've done well so far. Maybe the ones that you've taken, good luck on all of those. We're starting something, I guess, a little different today. We're still doing like the sum and difference identities. It's just now an equation instead of us kind of like simplifying just to, a value or an angle. We're now going to solve. Now our answers are still going to be angles, but it's now an equation. So you'll notice here, number one, we have an equal sign. Now we're still going to use the identities to kind of expand these out. All right, and once we expand them, then we just solve the equation. We basically solve for x, okay? So we're going to use cosine. Notice there's two here. So I got to use the cosine identity for this set right here, and then I got to do it for this set over here. So it's going to take some time here as far as me writing it. All right, so just a little patience, but we're going to expand out this first term, and it becomes cosine x cosine of pi over 4, right? Cosine of the first, cosine of the second. On your identity sheet, it's a and b, but we should be comfortable with that so far. All right, and then it's minus sine x and sine of pi over 4. So that was me just expanding out this first parenthesis, okay? Now I got to do it again here. So it's going to be plus, same thing. Use this term, cosine x cosine of pi over 4. Remember, check your signs. Be careful, right? So this one's a cosine minus. So it's cosine A, cosine B. Now it's plus. All right, so you just want to be aware of that. And you guys, for the most part, did well on your quiz. All right, just a couple small sign mistakes, which I know happens. So sine of x, sine of pi over 4. Now, kind of running out of room here, so I don't know if I could put the equals 1. I'll bring that back in later. But once you expand everything out, once you expand this term and this term, all right, now you're going to look to group like terms. And there's going to be something that cancels because you're going to have a negative and a positive in this case, right? So in this case, we had a negative sine x, sine pi over 4, and a plus sine x, sine pi over 4. So those would be 0, right? They would cancel each other out. Then we would have to combine these terms. We have 2 of the exact same thing. So it becomes 2 cosine x cosine of pi over 4 equals 1. All right. Now at this point, we don't know what x is. That's what we're solving for. But we have some other things that we can maybe add into this and begin to simplify. For instance, we know what cosine of pi over 4 is, right? The x coordinate of pi over 4 is root 2 over 2. So I'm going to insert that now into our equation. We're still trying to just get that cosine x by itself, so I'm not done simplifying yet. But it's 2 times cosine x times root 2 over 2. Well, just think, 2 times root 2 over 2, these 2's are going to cancel. And then it's just cosine x times root 2, or if you wanted to put the root 2 first, it doesn't matter. And you got root 2 cosine x equals 1. If we divide by root 2, we would get 1 over the square root of 2, which we would know that we couldn't leave it as that because the denominator would have a radical. So in our attempt to rationalize that, we would get root 2 over 2. Now we've solved for x, right? We got cosine x by itself. We're down to the very end where now it's time to get our answers, and we just simply say, all right, well, what angles have a cosine, right, an x value of root 2 over 2? And since x is positive in the first and the fourth quadrant, your answers are going to be pi over 4 and 7 pi over 4. All right, and that's it. Those are your two answers. This one's going to be very similar. Same thing. First, just expand it out. So cosine of x, use your identity sheet, cosine of pi over 6. And then, look, ignore that minus for now. It's this one that we're focused on, just this first term here. So then minus sine x, sine pi over 6. Now it's going to be minus, and because we're subtracting this other quantity here, I'm going to put a parenthesis, and you'll see why in a few minutes, but it's going to be minus, and I'm going to expand this out. So again, it's minus this quantity, cosine x, again, I'll add that equals 1/2 in the next step. But it's important that we understand why I put the parentheses, right? Because we're subtracting a term. And now because we're subtracting this whole quantity here, we have to distribute that negative. So the negative is going to go here as well as here, right? We're distributing it in. So it's going to be negative cosine. Rather than rewrite things, I'm just going to use the eraser here and kind of change the signs up. So I'm distributing that negative in. And the result of which would now be negative cosine x and negative sine x. Okay? So we get down to this step. It's now going to be time to group like terms. We can cancel some of these out. We have 2 of these. So it's negative 2 sine x sine of pi over 6 equals 1/2. All right, this next step, you're now going to replace the value for whatever sine of pi over 6 is in this case. All right, so we know that to be 1/2. Negative 2 times negative 1/2 is negative 1. So negative sine x equals positive 1/2. So I hope you're watching the video. Hope you're taking the notes. You probably don't need to stop and pause because it takes me forever to write. But hopefully you're doing that if need be. And we would continue to solve here. We would divide by the negative 1 because it's hard for me to write. I'm just going to cheat here. I'm going to erase that negative sign. Just put the negative sign here. And my answer is going to be the 2 angles that have a negative y value they have a y value of negative 1/2. Well, y is negative, right, in the third and the fourth quadrant. It's going to be pi over 6. So in this case, my two answers are going to be 7 pi over 6 and 11 pi over 6. All right, last problem. All right, last problem. We're still using those same identities. This problem just happens to have sign, but we're still going to refer to it so we know what we're doing as far as we expanding it, right? It's going to be sine x cosine of 2 pi over 3 and then minus cosine of x sine of 2 pi over 3. Now, if you're a little confused as to like why these look different or why they look longer or more than they did last week, is because, well, there's two of them now in every problem, right? The ones that we did last week just had you expand one identity, one sine or one cosine. So that was pretty much all you had to do. Well, now we have two of them in each problem. So that's why that first step is just going to take us, it's going to take a little longer. It's going to be a little more lengthy. But from there, we kind of cross out like terms and work our way to our answer. So that's just this first piece here. Okay. Now I'm going to do the second, but be careful when you're subtracting. All right. So I would put minus. I'm going to use the parenthesis and now expand this second term, right? So sine x cosine of 2 pi over 3 plus cosine x and sine of 2 pi over 3. So not everything's going to be in the first quadrant. So make sure that when you're thinking about these 2 pi over 3 that we identify what quadrant it is, because we have to be aware of the signs. I'll put the equal 0 in the next step. Okay, so that's just the first step. That's us expanding both of these out. The first, the second, being aware of the minus sign here. And again, just to kind of save some time, I'm going to distribute this negative and just change the signs with the eraser here. So the first term here is now negative, and so is the second. All right. As we look to cross out, we notice we can cross these terms out. And now we combine the like terms, and we have two of them, and they're just negative, so negative 2 cosine x sine of 2 pi over 3 equals 0. All right, start thinking about what 2 pi over 3 is, the y coordinate of it. And it's in quadrant 2 where the y coordinate is positive. So it's a positive root 3 over 2. This 2 and this 2 can cancel, and it becomes negative root 3 cosine x equals 0. As you would solve for x, you're going to divide by negative root 3, but 0 divided by anything is just going to be 0. So again, I'm just going to erase a little here, save myself some time. as I divide by this to solve, right? 0 divided by anything, just 0. So where is, or what angles have a cosine, an x value of 0? Well, they would be the angles on the y-axis, so it would be right there and right there. Pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. 2 answers. All right, so guys, watch this video. I think you'll be okay with this, just because it's so much like what we've done between not just what we did last week, but we're continuing to using these special angles, which we've done now for months. So hope everybody has a good day, good start to their week. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks.